It's wonderful to see so many of you here, and we had a fantastic opening on Saturday night with about, 220 odd people. So,
not much room to.
Yeah, so it's wonderful to have you back. And actually, we've got a catalogue too. I just want to mention that we do have a catalogue which will be available in a few weeks once it's been through final proof and off to the printer. But there is a more or less complete version printed out at the front desk if you'd like to purchase one for a special pre-publication price of $20. It will retail at $25. And then I'm sure we can get Wilf and Janet to sign it for you. So, over to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. It's really great to see you all, and we're going to just share a bit of our lives with you. It's been a journey and an adventure, and it still is, actually. Even this morning when I was looking out, there was a couple of birds that we don't normally see in the garden, and that was the Australian rainbow lorikeets. And there's always been something, even though we've lived in the country all that time, we haven't travelled, there's each day is something to enjoy and to discover and to work at. It's been a great creative journey, but also a spiritual journey of living close to the land and just enjoying God's creation, really. Yes. So I'll pass over to Wilf now.
Yeah, I think it's a Chinese saying that a great journey can be simply a journey from your front door to your gate. It's a matter of being observant and experiencing what you can find in that situation. So that's been us, really. We haven't travelled overseas. We've spent most of our life at Waikanae and thoroughly enjoying it. How did I get?
Can we just ask you to project so that the people at the...
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's the beard.
Yes. It's a built-in filter, yeah, right. All right, I'll do my best. I suppose I'll start with how I became involved in potting, which is quite a story in itself. When I was very young, I was mostly interested in entomology, and I spent quite a bit of time at the Canterbury Museum. I'd ride over on my bicycle on a Saturday morning and work with the entomologists there, and who studied especially spiders and so on. And so that was my real interest in those days. Anyway, how I came to be interested in pottery was that I worked at an interior decorator's in Willis Street, Hurdley's, and I used to wander through the Lambton Quay and Woodward Street in my lunchtime, and I wandered into a small shop called Stockton's. And what attracted me to the shop was Hans Koper pots they had on display, and I knew nothing about pottery, nothing about handmade pottery, anything like that, but these pots seemed to just draw me into the shop, and I used to go back many times to see the latest Hans Koper that had been imported. Anyway, what happened was that the shop came up for sale. I think it was my mother who discovered it in the classified advertisements, and so she managed to talk my father into buying it. So that was incredible, wasn't it? So I was incredibly fortunate right from the start, and so I always remember my father, who was a very practical person. We went upstairs to talk to the owner of the shop anyway, John Bidwell, that's right. And he was sitting at a massive, his desk was a huge packing case My father said, "Have you any dead stock?" He said, "What do you mean?" Well, he said, "Stock you can't sell." "Oh, yes," he said, thumping the huge crate. "This is full of it." And my father said, "But haven't you opened it?" He said, "Well, what's the use? The last case didn't sell." So he was using it as a desk. But anyway, so that's how it all started. And then through the shop at the time imported, apart from Hans Cooper and Lucy Ree, which were absolutely fabulous pots, most of it was slick, what they called contemporary chinaware and ovenware from Rostrand and places like that in Europe. And so we took over the shop finally, and then I was approached by Chapman Taylor. Now, he was the agent for Bernard Leach in New Zealand. And he came to me and said, "Would you be interested in stocking some of the Leach potteries?" And I looked at them, and again, I knew very little about handmade pottery, but I was really attracted to it. And so I said, yes, I would. So we got a selection of Leach pottery in the store. And I remember John Bidwell coming in and looking at it and saying, "You're going to go bankrupt." He said, "I tried selling that and it just about bankrupted me. Nobody was interested. It was awful. Don't do it." And I thought, well, no, I really enjoy it and appreciate it. And I thought, well, I'm going to. And I managed to communicate that enthusiasm to other people, and we eventually sold so many pieces of Leach pottery, the standard, Leach pottery, not personal, not domestic wear. He offered us the agency. So, but anyway, through the emphasis changing in the shop from slick industrial commercial wear to handmade pottery, it attracted some of the early potters who were in the Wellington area at the time. The first, of course, most important was Helen Mason, and she used to come into the shop and discuss with me country kilns in England and so on, and suggesting that we try and import these pots into our shop. And so we did. What we used to do, we worked through a shipping agency called S.H. Locke, and what they would do, we would arrange consignments from various country kilns, which would all be packed into tea chests. And when they got a number of these different potters' works into their store, packed in the tea chests, they would then consign them in one consignment to New Zealand, to Stockton's. So there we are. And through Helen Mason, I met Terry Barrow, who was ethnologist at the museum at the time, very interested in pottery, had probably one of the first people to make contact with Bernard Leach, and with also Hamada and some of the Japanese potters. And he'd gone over several times to Japan. And then through Terry I met Barry Brickle. Now Barry was the most enthusiastic person and absolutely, keen on building kilns as well as potting. And he said, "I think I should build you a kiln, Wolf." And so we had the property at Rickarangi at the time, and so we came out and he spent a weekend with us, and he thought that would be the great place to have a kiln. In the meantime, of course, I'd gotten so interested I decided to try and start working with clay myself, and I went to Doreen Bloomhart's adult education classes, which she ran in the Glen in the craft centre there. That was for the training college. They had about 3 wheels, and there was about 20 or 30 people in the class, so we didn't get much time on a wheel. And Helen Mason said to me, "Well, why don't you come up to my studio and I'll give you some extra lessons?" And so she was a tremendous help to me. And eventually, of course, I could see the only way to really get ahead was to have your own wheel and practice. You don't learn to play the piano by practicing, half an hour a week or an hour a week. It's every day that counts. So that's what happened. But in the meantime, Barry decided he'd build a round downdraft oil-fired kiln at Waikanae. And he said to order, I don't know, a truckload of bricks. And I forgot to tell my parents, of course, that my sister, that I had done this. And I was out, and this truck arrived with full of bricks, and my sister went out and said, I think you must have the wrong place. He said, is your name right? And she said, well, yes. He said, well, it's yours, madam. And immediately emptied the truck on the driveway, which was great. So that was. So when I got home, I was confronted with a perplexed sister and mother who couldn't. She said, "But we're not building a house, you know." But anyway, Barry came down from Auckland, and we worked on the building of the kiln, and so that. And then Helen had a brilliant idea. She said that the DSIR had a ceramic division, and she suggested that we should write in, because apparently organisations involved in clay work had the right to have representation on the committee of this institution. Yeah, that's right. So she said, get a letterhead, get a letter typed, and send it to the director, and saying that you've established this kiln here in the valley, and you would like to have be able to join the organisation. So I sent this letter in. I heard nothing about it for several weeks, and then one Saturday afternoon, a gentleman arrived and introduced himself as the director of the institution, and wanted to know where our kilns were. He'd been driving around the valley looking for huge chimney stacks, because apparently he read the letter to the meeting, and of course it was made up of Crown Lynn and Crumb Brickworks and all these huge corporate organisations through the country, and they were infuriated that he had allowed opposition to start without any of them knowing, right at his back door, as it were. So he was commissioned to go out on this weekend and find out all about it. So he came in and he said, you have a kiln here? I said, yes. And he said, well, you realise this is a totally useless place to have a building, a business of this sort. He said, you need to be near a railhead. I said, well, maybe. Yeah.
There's a spider.
Oh, yeah. I'm very interested in spiders, actually. Don't kill it. That's very appropriate. Yeah.
That's because you spoke about spiders.
Yes, that's right. Anyway, right, where was I? And so I gave him a cup of coffee and calmed him down, and he said that his position had been threatened by the very fact that he had allowed this to happen without telling the others. So I took him down and showed him our kiln, and he was totally amazed, but of course realised there was no real threat to Crown Lynn or the Crumb Brickworks, and so he was quite relieved about that. But so that was an amusing story, but we never heard from him again.
And then we met, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. That was the next very important thing, yes. That was in 1961. And
I was working at the Mon Marie.
Yes, and Barry Brickell and I had been out going around a few of the coffee bars in Wellington, and we'd parked my car outside the Mon Marie, And when we got back, we realised I'd lost the key, which wasn't...
Which is not unusual over the last 50 years.
And so Barry said, look, if we had a piece of bent wire and a screwdriver, I'm sure I could get the car going. So I went into the Monmarie and Jan was there. And I went up to the counter and I said, oh, excuse me, but have you a piece of bent wire and a screwdriver? And she thought I was raving mad.
Still do.
Yeah, she still does. And so actually we then, when Jan couldn't supply the piece of bent wire and a screwdriver, we went to down to the Central Police Station and wandered into and there was a constable tapping out on some letter on a typewriter with two fingers, and he said, what do you want? And I said, well, I'd like a piece of bent wire and a screwdriver. And Barry said, yes, we want to convert a Jaguar. I said, do you mind being quiet? So he said, you get the sergeant. So the sergeant came out and he said, come out to the patrol car, I'll drive you up there. Well, he actually got the car started without any question as to whether we owned it or not, and drove off, which was great. But at that time there was somebody going around converting Jaguars, so it was just as well we were honest. Anyway, that's how we met.
That's
Yes,
right.
yes.
And then we decided to get married, and we decided that it would be nice to make a living from pottery.
Well,
Instead
yes.
of, having a shop in town just to try and make the pottery, but of course it was quite a feat to be able to make a living at that stage, because people didn't even know what you did with pottery, and to actually eat or drink out of it was sort of, they said, do you really, it's not going to be contaminated or anything like that. No, it's right up to 1300 degrees centigrade and things like that. And so we persevered, but it was quite hard to begin with, wasn't it?
Oh yes, it was a real
we often
challenge.
used to have to stop and have a cup of tea or coffee and look at the problem, or you'd open a kiln and the glazes had run. And
well, it was a great
learning
curve, and we, it was learning as you go along. But in those days, we were very fortunate because there were very few potters around, and all of us shared information generously, and so we got a tremendous help from a lot of potters and so on. And but it was certainly a challenge, and it was certainly an involved process of learning and so on.
We dug our own clay.
Yes, as you can see, there's some guy I don't recognise on that film back there that is digging clay, and that was in the actual valley itself.
So it was quite hard work, wasn't it? Digging clay, breaking it up, setting it out, drying it out, then wedging it and getting it to the consistency of throwing. And so eventually Ian McPherson down in Nelson started producing clay for potters, and so we sort of just occasionally would go and dig clay, and we would buy some, which meant we could spend time potting. And at the same time we thought it would be nice to live off the land, but then we realised that we only had a certain amount of time each day,
and energy.
And it was really potting takes quite a lot of time and effort and energy. And so we decided that we better just concentrate on that, which we liked, and we loved doing it. And you had to be quite strong, and I think Wilf called me the Amazon. Because we always had, you had to lift, and you did your back in a few times. And then we started supplying shops, didn't we? And had busloads of people that would come out to see us demonstrating making pots or glazing, and then there were quite a few craft shops starting to set up. I think every little town and in the cities, many craft shops. So it got to the stage where we were able to supply people, and just about every week or two someone would come and buy some pots so we were able to eat.
But it was a great joy to be
Yes.
working with clay, and a great joy to be able to live in the country and the valley, which was so beautiful, and feel in touch with nature and so on. But but also it's quite interesting. Jan, when she would work with clay, she would actually often beforehand draw shapes. So she had these lovely books of drawings, and that would inspire her in her work. I didn't draw, so but I found that what happened was that my I suppose my interpretation of form and new ideas came through the actual working with the clay. I would set out to make bowls or individual pieces and that sort of thing, and even teapots, things like that. But in the process of working, an idea would evolve, and so I would end up with something that was totally different from the idea that I had started out with. So that was just two different ways of working. I guess Jan worked that way too, but I never actually drew my ideas about form beforehand. But it was
You didn't like making things to order, did you?
I'm not very good at making things to
No,
order,
no.
because I would go over to start the day's work, and Jan would say, "What about making those teapots?" Well, I didn't feel like making teapots at that particular moment. I said, "Oh no, I've got something else planned," you know. But I always remember one day this gentleman came down the drive on a Saturday morning, and I thought, "Yeah, he looks familiar." So I said, "Look, I know I should know you." He said, "You certainly should." I said, "Oh." He said, "Yes, I'm the guy who's been waiting 12 years for a herb planter." So I said, "Well, I didn't realise that anybody could be so impatient." I don't think he ever got it, actually, but I couldn't, but there were always much more exciting things to do than make herb planters, but there we are.
So we didn't exhibit in main exhibitions much, did we?
Well,
we did at the beginning.
Yes, yeah. But what we found was that we sold everything at the potteries and then all to the shops.
Or we would do shows at the lifestyle show. People would ask us to go and demonstrate, and you'd have a nice display of pots, and people would buy them there, wouldn't they?
It was, fairly full-on work, actually, but it was a great joy, because when you're working in a creative sense, there is so much pleasure and enjoyment in the work, no matter how hard it is.
We had to change a little bit for the focus when there was the 1987 stock market crash, because a lot of our customers were affected, weren't they? And we decided that we'd have to have another form of income as well as the pottery, and that's when we decided to start a cafe, which was a learning curve too. But it worked in really well, because people would come out, see some pots, buy a few pots and have a cup of coffee, and then perhaps have something for lunch. And then we sort of developed having a few evening meals, but it meant that we could still stay there, pay the bills, and keep on planting trees and looking after animals
and making the pots we like.
And making the pots we liked. Yes, that's very important. I know.
It gave us
terribly important.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
But yes, I think that it's quite interesting when you think, I was attracted to Hans Kofer pots and that's what brought me into the shop Stockton's in the first place. But I don't think you would see much influence in the pots that I have here that could remind you of Hans Koper. But mind you, yes, and Hans Koper's pots in those days. But I think probably overall the influence that the main influence for me was Konjura Kawai, a Japanese potter that's not so often known about, but also a national living treasure in Japan at the time. And he used traditional glazes, but he used them in the most extraordinary way. And I think that, to me, was very interesting. I think the whole thing that was interesting, first of all, of course, it was Bernard Leach's book, which we used or referred to as the Potter's Bible. And he brought a new understanding of Oriental high-fired techniques. And then, of course, there was the work of Hamada and various other potters. We imported into the shop pots. We had exhibitions of various works, local works, Barry Brickle and Merrick Schmusick and various people like that. But also we imported pots from Japan. Terry Barrow was in contact with Dr. Yanagi, who was director of the Folk Art Museum in Japan. And Terry wrote to Dr. Yanagi explaining that we would be interested in importing a range of pots from the country kilns of Japan. So he actually organized and picked the pots and sent them to us. And the first exhibition we had was opened by Dr. Colin Bailey, who was a great supporter of the pottery movement here, and a professor of education at Victoria University at the time. And the second consignment was opened that we had in our years, was opened by Dr. Bill Such, who was also a great enthusiast for crafts in New Zealand, and he saw a great potential for the craft movement generally in the country.
Can we just alert people to the cabinet behind
Oh
you?
yes, I can show you here. Yes, sorry. Now, wait a minute, what have we got here? These are some of the Mingei pots here. This is a Konjura Kawai teapot.
No.
That's yeah, that actually is a cup and saucer, yes. And this is a little, now this is an interesting shard here. Hamada came to New Zealand, he came out to the potteries, and he was, 1965, and he was demonstrating brushwork to the Wellington Potters group there. But he wouldn't decorate biscuited pots, a whole pot. He wanted shards, probably for good reason too, because he thought probably people would sell them at a huge price or something. So after the demonstration, I went around and collected the shards and fired them. And so that and gave them out to various people who were interested, and that's one of the shards there. That's right.
And the Hans Koper and
yeah, and here this is a little pot made by Hamada and decorated by my friend, Terry Barrow, who was staying with him at the time. This is a little Hagi teapot. Part of the Hagi potteries were part of the country kilns, but that came from Terry. It didn't come from the consignment of pots from Japan, and it must be fairly low, reasonably low fired for stoneware, and you can see how it's been greatly used. And the tannin from the tea is actually travelled right up the handle of the pot, which is interesting. And yeah, and over here, of course, there's the Hanskopa. Now those two beautiful pots there are by Hanskopa. Those are Lucy Ree, and that bowl is by Lucy Ree, and the beaker as well. These were all, these were bought actually from us, but they were part of the last consignment of pottery from England before we closed the shop down. But just trying to think what else there is.
Fine, but you can see that there's a certain amount of influence, even though you say that there isn't. But with your pots that are, they've got the bases narrow and coming through. I think that makes a difference.
Yes, I think
and the clean lines on some of those ones. Yeah.
I think that people tend to think sometimes in terms of pottery, and they have an organic form which comes from nature, and certainly there's some wonderful organic forms that come from nature. But nature is not all about organic forms. When you think of the plates, the way they move and thrust up become mountains and so on, and the huge forms of rock and rock face and everything that are not organic in the sense that we often think of in nature, but they are all inspiring, I think. So that I would say that the pots, some of my pots especially, are influenced from geographical expressions of nature, I think. I think this, for instance, this pot here is just simply incredible. Just the sheer richness of it, and the texture, and all the exciting things that are happening, coming through the glaze and the clay, and things like that, which are really interesting. But there we are, so I'll sit down.
Well, can I ask you?
You can, yes, thank you.
You've got a lot of grog in those pots. Did you make your own grog, or did you buy that in?
No, I collected it.
Okay.
We went down to Nelson with Ian McPherson, had a great day down there, prospecting on several occasions, and
Okay. And the ones with the copper glaze on, which of course those that pop now, it's the most extremely difficult colour to get. Was that from your oil-fired kiln? Or
you can get it with gas kiln. You can with your copper glaze in a neutral atmosphere, like an electric kiln and that, you will get rich greens. Exactly the same glaze in a kiln that is being fired by burning in organic fuel, you will get reduction atmospheres. Now that's where you're burning up all the oxygen in the clay, in the kiln, and actually then the flames start burning up the oxygen in the actual clay itself, and you get a complete change, and that's when you get the rich reds with the copper glaze. Yes, and sometimes you can get a mixture where there's been oxidation and reduction in the same firing, and you can get the copper red and the green sort of intermixed, or flashes of green and so on. Yeah.
Do you have a favourite shape, and does your favourite shape change over the decade?
I think it probably changes, but I mean, I find bowls particularly fascinating because when I make a bowl, it's not just for use. It's as a form of sculpture, like this, like the one I just showed you, like the red one up there, and quite a few of the others too. It's incorporating within a simple form sculptural qualities that go beyond it being just a ball. I think that's how I would describe it. Yeah.
You mentioned that Helen had visited you, but also other potters that have worked with you, or...
Oh yes, that's right. We were very lucky, of course. I was very lucky that there was an English potter working in Japan as a student with master potters over there. He'd gone into Japan on a student's visa, and it had run out, or was about to run out. And he wanted somewhere to go because he could renew the visa in about 3 months' time and re-enter Japan to work. But he didn't want to go too far. He didn't want to go back to England where he came from because the journey back would be too expensive. So he wrote to the editorial committee of the New Zealand Potter, which was Helen Mason, I think probably Doreen Bloomhart and Roy Cohn and Terry Vera and people like that, asking whether there was somewhere where he could work. And so Helen wrote back and said, yes, you could work at Wilf's pottery at Rikarangi, which was great. He came out and he worked for 3 months, or I worked with him for 3 months, and I learnt so much because he had worked in country kilns in England, and he'd gained a tremendous amount of knowledge about running a country kiln and the processes involved and so on. And so I was very, very fortunate. It was for 3 solid months of working with him. So at the end of that time I'd learnt a tremendous amount.
That was John Chappell, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, that was John Chappell, yes. No, where was John Chappell's? Over here. There you are. You can see the little wine pot there. That, in fact, and the little goblets. The little goblets were not made at Rikarangi, but the wine pitcher was. Yeah. So that was a great influence, and we had some great times in those days.
And also other people that visited, like
there was
Takichi
Kawai, and he came out to the potteries and had a meal with us, and he demonstrated making and decorating pots in Wellington, and Bernard Leach, of course, and I think that's...
I think the other thing you should mention is that Roy Cowan designed...
Oh, I should mention the help that I've got. I got from New Zealand potters, early potters at the time. Helen Mason was a great help. We used to dig clay, and we used in Parramatta in those days, and bring it out. I had an old Model A truck, and I used to bring the clay back in that. And then she would also, because when Barry built me the kiln, I wasn't very proficient at potting. That had to come through work later, gradually. But so Helen would make a lot of pots, and when they were still leather hard and easy to transport, she'd bring them out in the boot of her car, and we would stack them in the shed next to the kiln and keep them until we had enough to have a firing, and then Barry would come down and fire the kiln. And so
about the time that Barry stuck the little bit of clay.
Well, I wasn't going to, but
some things that can happen.
Barry's a very enthusiastic person, and but not always patient enough to wait for something that was needed to be acquired. And he came down full of enthusiasm. He's the only person who got off the express from Auckland looking absolutely radiant, yes, and fresh and full of vigour. Everybody else came out looking as though they'd had an experience, a near-death experience. And the first thing he'd do was, in those days, of course, there was a cafeteria on the station at Paikok, and he wouldn't move from the station until he had a block of railway birthday cake and a cup of disgusting station coffee. So
Okay,
it was
Fruitcake.
It was a fruitcake.
But he called it railway birthday cake.
we reckoned that ahead of the express there would be a train travelling south delivering to the various stations
Exactly
the same the same food. Yeah, but anyway, and then the first thing he'd do would be we'd drive to the end of the valley and we'd walk the Mangoni track before we started the day's work. So he was an incredible character, massive amount of energy. But anyway, Helen had worked hard getting all these pots together. I had a few, and he came along and said, "Oh yes, there's enough for 2 firings." Later on in the morning, he decided you could get them all into 1 firing, so that was fine. So he said, "Now what I want you to do is roll out lots of little balls of clay." And what he did was, he said, "Take all the shelves up. We don't need the shelves. We just stack one pot on top of the other, and on the rim of the bottom pot you put these 3 balls of clay. Then you put the next pot on, and so on. So you had these great, fascinating columns of pots." But the only thing was that the little balls of clay should have been made out of fire clay. But I didn't have any fire clay. So he said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll use the same clay that we made the pots out of." Yeah, right. So anyway, we did that. And we had the first firing. I think a guy called John Kingston, who was a sculptor from America, I think it was, who was staying with Barry. He came down to help. And it was a very cold, frosty weather at that time. And we had this old implement shed that we still have there. And there's a little room in that we... and we got a pot-belly stove. But Barry decided to convert it to oil, which he did, by simply just getting a small tank of oil and a tap and a piece of copper piping, which just dripped, and you just lit a fire in the base, turn the tap on slowly and increase it, and then you got this fire raging all night in the pot-bellied stove to keep us warm. And we had one would be on duty, on watch, as once we got the kiln going, and we fired right through the night. And I always remember, but before that there was a tremendous explosion. And we thought, oh, what's happened? So we had this big discussion. We decided Barry had made a huge slab of fire clay, which we thought we'd dried out, and we put it in the centre of the kiln on the floor.
It's a different firing then, if you were talking about the fire clay, because you didn't have any before.
No, that was made before he fired the kiln. But anyway, so we decided it must have been that blowing up. So it was probably all right to go on with the firing. So that was fine. And then as we got to daybreak, Barry was on watch. He came bursting in. He said, "Have a look at this!" And we all went out. And there it was, there was frost all over the ground. The kiln had been belching black smoke all night, and there was this incredible ring of black smoke right around the valley. And we were so elated. This was all our own work. Nobody had talked about pollution in those days. So anyway, and as we watched, the sun came up, and the black ring of smoke dispersed as a dense, thick smog, and just came right down to ground level, and you couldn't see anything else anywhere, So that was exciting. But anyway, then the salting process was also exciting, because we had 3 fireboxes and fire bungs above the fireboxes, and the idea was that when when the kiln got up to temperature, then you'd take the fireboxes out and throw the salt in, which was thick coarse agricultural crystals of salt, and they'd spit back at you. Red hot particles of salt would spit back at you, so you had to have and you couldn't get near the burners for the heat, so you had oilskin raincoats and sou'wester hats, and goggles, and it looked as though there were three high priests attending some kind of ritual. It was absolutely amazing. And as you threw the salt in, you got this fantastic hydrochloric acid smog coming back at you, and exciting things like that, you know.
What happened when you opened up?
And then the same thing happened, of course, then, that the smog went up into the atmosphere and then drifted down in a sort of dense grey-white smog. So that was brilliant. Anyway, finally turned the kiln off, and 3 days later it was ready to be opened, and we opened it, and it was just absolutely brilliant. The glazes were absolutely fantastic. The salt glaze, the columns, the sculptural columns of pots looked great until we tried to get one off the other, and it didn't work. So Barry suggested we get hammers and just tap them. Well, in a very short time, all we had was shards. And I remember Doreen was not amused by this. So
She come out to see Brickle.
She rang up and said, "I'm coming out to see Brickle. Tell him I shall be there in an hour." And Barry said, when I told him, "I think I should head for the hills." So that was, but we had other great firings in the kiln that were good, yes. But it was, we had trouble with the kiln because it was built right on ground level. And the flue from the centre of the kiln, there was a flue in the centre of the kiln and an underground flue to the chimney, about a metre or so away from the actual kiln. So with our conditions in the valley, it got very, very damp in the winter time. And of course we were using old engine oil. That's why we got so much smoke. We'd go around and collect old engine oil from the different garages. And we had no secondary air supply, so we didn't have fans supplying extra air to the burners, so it was totally uncontrollable, you know. And so it was either black smoke or nothing, you know. And so later on, Roy Cowan decided that he could help improve this, and he designed a kiln for us using secondary air, and where you could actually control the flame and get reduction, the amount of reduction you wanted, not in excess, and you could have it at the right time, and you didn't have to have it all right through the process of firing. And I knew Barry would build an excellent kiln, and I knew that Roy would design it. But I didn't tell each of them what was happening. I said, Barry, would you build this kiln? Oh, yes, I'll build the kiln. And Roy designed it. And I didn't say to Roy that Barry was building it, and I didn't say to Barry that Roy was designing it until he arrived. And he said, I shall ring him up. So he rang, and he must have spoken for about 2 hours on the phone. And finally he said, I've made some alterations, so he was quite happy. But anyway,
that was the early days.
That was the late 1960s probably. No, well, the first kiln was built, Barry built the first one in 1957, so it was probably about 1965 or 4, yeah, that's right. And that kiln was great. We had many, many great firings in it. And
after that we had electric kilns and gas kilns too.
Now we use
not
it.
nearly as exciting.
Well, then I always remember on several occasions we'd be firing the kiln through the night, and there'd be a huge electrical storm which you can only experience in the valley, when the clap of thunder and the whole ground shakes and the valley shake, the buildings shake, and you'd be in there with the rain pouring down on the tin roof, and these electrical storms going on, and the kiln sounding like the engine room of a boat. It was fantastic. It was a brilliant experience. Yeah. But no, then we went, as Jan said, to electric kilns, but also gas kilns. We use a gas kiln now because it's a little easier to...
But you still get reduction.
But you get all the conditions that you got in the oil-fired kilns. So you get the great glazes that you were able to achieve in that. Yeah, that's right.
And the other thing that I think we should mention is that we've had help over the years, haven't we, from lots of friends and people that have come in and just given us some encouragement and things, and we've been really lucky like that.
We've been very, very fortunate. Yeah, I think the first thing. So when we first got started, I think the locals couldn't understand us at all. They thought we were obviously demented. They were probably right, but and I remember one farmer across the road. He was quite a cantankerous old guy, but I quite liked him. We got on with him well. But he came down for coffee one day, and he walked in with his farm labourer, young guy, and he walked in, and he looked at. I had paintings on the walls. We had. I forget the name of it. Yeah, and we had, modern paintings and so on. And he looked at them and he said, "My God, they're mad!" Yeah, it was so funny in those days. But
I'm thinking of the painters and that sort of thing.
Well, of course, there was on the coast here.
And also generally like Toss Wollaston.
Toss Wollaston was quite a friend of ours. He used to come up from Nelson to buy his brushes and paints from a place in a supplier who was actually based in Paravarama, and so he would then come on to us and have a meal and a great talk.
A lovely time, wasn't there, when he said his house was just being painted, and these painters came in and they were very laboriously doing everything very
so carefully.
And he said, "Get a bit of enthusiasm in it and just
slap it around and enjoy what you're doing." He said, "Oh, they were so boring."
And then also the other thing was that with the Stocktons, you had Icon Gallery, and you had.
We were agents. That's right. We were agents for the Icon Gallery in the very avant-garde gallery in Auckland, who were agents for Colin McCann, Pat Handley, and many other, all the well-known painters now. And we used to sell. We became their agent at Stocktons, and we used to sell all these, painters' works there, mainly small paintings, and mostly not more than about 10 guineas each, which is absolutely amazing. But we had this wonderful selection, and of course we met people like Pat Handley, Colin McCann, and various people. So that was really, really interesting. Yeah. And of course we knew Merrick, and we knew. I'm just trying to think. I was going to talk to you about other people who was a great help. Of course, the Cowans were a great help, and Helen Mason and Terry Barrow. There were many actually who were a great help to us. Yeah.
Wonderful, rich talk.
To
share so many aspects of your wonderful way of life at Rekarangi. Just a small token of our appreciation. Some of our books that we've been very proud to present.
Wow.
And very soon we'll be able to give you your own. Which tells the story of such a rich life that
beautiful,
has enriched not only people in the local district and Rekarangi Valley, but up and down the Kapiti coast and much further afield. Of course, there are many visitors, some quite illustrious. When I told my daughter that Orlando Bloom was
Yeah.
staying at Rikarangi, during the filming of Lord of the Rings. She sort of went,
Yes,
oh,
it's quite funny. Yes, our nieces sort of said, "You should have told us, and we would have come up and
yes.
wait for nothing,
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's been really wonderful to hear some of your stories. I know there are many more, and people are most welcome to come back when our friends have their first event of the new year on Sunday, August the 4th. We'll start with lunch and soup, being midwinter. So that's 12 o'clock on Sunday the 10th of August.
Is it the 4th?
4th of August.
Yes, that's right. That's fine.
And if you would like to join as a friend at that time, you can. But and then you can come for free. But if you would like to come as a guest, it would cost only $10. And by then, I'm sure we will have
This book.
the book available.
Oh, that's
So,
good.
yeah. So
Thank you.
Thank you again, and thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you very much.